Hello there. Welcome into a Monday edition of the show. So glad to have you, whether you're listening on 740 KVOR, Extra Sports 1300, or the streaming apps of those two fine radio stations, which can be found wherever fine radio streaming apps are given away because they are free at all times, free to download, free to use, and they are sponsored by Diversus Health, mental health, and well-being for all. A veritable cornucopia of sports topics await you, and I'd love to get your thoughts at 719-247-1313. You could call or text them in. Let us begin with a little hoops here off the top. 11 games. That's what the fully healthy Nuggets have to get themselves right for the playoffs. And if you want to be a little bit more fair to what this is all really about, probably it's more like 18, at most 18 games before they meet the Oklahoma City Thunder. That's what this is all about. This is all about whether the Denver Nuggets, fully healthy, can knock off the reigning NBA champions. Sunday was game one. No matter how you measure it, if it's the 11 because you're maybe a little bit worried about the Nuggets in the first round of the playoffs, or it's the up to 18, yesterday was game one. Peyton Watson scoring 14 points and grabbing 6 rebounds in his return in a 128-112 win over the Blazers. It was his first game back since February 4th. David Adelman, his head coach, said Watson looked tired, but kind of understood why.
You know, playing 3-on-3 and 5-on-5 with coaches is not the same as playing against the Blazers and Drew Holiday picking you up full the first time you touch the ball. I thought he was good. He was aggressive, got to the paint. I loved the 6 rebounds, the 3 assists. I think the more he has the ball and gets in the paint, the more experience he has doing that. I think the assist totals will go even higher because he really does bring 2-3 people with his length and the way he can finish. So first game back, a lot of positives from Peyton, and you can see the impact on our depth. You know, it's not just him. It's the ability to play different ways, which he provides, you know, with the things he can do on both ends of the floor.
And that last part is telling what his role is going to be. Just in case you thought maybe because of the way that overall he had played this season versus Cam Johnson, that maybe Peyton Watson would find himself in the starting lineup come playoff time. It's not going to happen. And it shouldn't. I was never a proponent of it because of the difficulties that Cam Johnson has had this year. I don't know how feasible it is that Peyton Watson is going to remain a Denver Nugget past this year. But the Denver Nuggets, in the meantime, need to do everything they can to fully understand what Peyton Watson is capable of. And putting him in the starting 5, putting him in what I've referred to as that box that Michael Porter used to reside in, Cam Johnson has been in there, you don't find out what Peyton Watson is truly capable of. Put him with the second unit. Give him more freedom. And you heard David Adelman talk about the more he has the ball in his hands. You don't get the ball in your hands a lot if you're on many trips down the floor, the 4th offensive option. So Peyton Watson's place is with that second unit. And I don't know if you've noticed this, Cam Johnson, and this was pointed out by the Nuggets social media team today, doing pretty well lately, averaging about 16 points a game over his last 7. So just as he's figuring it out, you're going to put Peyton Watson there. You brought in Cam Johnson to effectively replace Michael Porter. Let him replace Michael Porter. Let Peyton Watson be his own thing and add to the depth that you have on this team. And as far as that second unit with Watson is concerned, here's what David Adelman sees out of it.
I think when Aaron's, minutes can go higher, we had him in a good spot tonight, but you can almost play small but be big at the same time. I think that's the ultimate goal in our league is these teams that we say play small. Like Amen Thompson's not small. It's like we say he is. Jabari Smith is not small. So I think we use that term loosely sometimes. But if you have Aaron at your 5 and you can slide, Spence and Peyton at your 3 and your 4, that's a big small ball lineup. So, but right now I like the group the way they're playing.
Two things that I hope you noticed. One, he's referred to 2 Rockets players. If the season ended today, that would be the first round matchup. So can tell where David Adelman's head's at, where he's talking about the Rockets. And secondly, notice one guy that doesn't fit into that, the big, small, big lineup, Jonas Valanciunas, who got 0 minutes last night. 0. With 11, now 10 games left, the fact that Valanciunas isn't a part of the rotation, that is telling. Because we could say that in reality, the playoffs start in 10 days. Kind of with seeding, they kind of start now. If you're not figuring out your rotations for the playoffs, what are you doing with 10 games left in the regular season? Like, this is it. You got to get ready. So the fact that Valanciunas, and this is not a new phenomenon, he's been getting phased out of this rotation for weeks. But that's what the second unit is going to be. Aaron Gordon, just as he was during the title run, is going to be effectively Nikola Jokic's backup. They'll stagger him with the second unit, and he'll be their backup center. So Jonas Valanciunas, thanks for filling in for Nikola Jokic for those few weeks, but you can go ahead and go to Greece now. This guy, he is definitely not going to be a Denver Nugget moving forward. And I don't know if that's a bad thing, because right now that second unit is doing some things. The more consequential, we got to call Sunday what it is. Sunday was a chance for the Nuggets to kind of show off a little bit. Hey, we got everyone back. Look at what we can do against the Blazers. The more consequential game of the weekend was Friday against Toronto. That was a game that the Nuggets trailed by double digits, and it was that second unit that gave them a chance to win that basketball game. So right now, it's working. So it's hard for me to sit here and, it does. I thought that Valanciunas was supposed to be Nikola Jokic's backup at all times. But you shorten the rotation, and maybe it was always going to be this way, that you just wanted a big body to get you through the regular season, knowing full well that because it worked during the title run, you were going to put Aaron Gordon staggered with the second unit. So without Jonas Valanciunas and with Peyton Watson, onward and upward for the Denver Nuggets. Here's Peyton immediately following the win over the Blazers, talking about what he thinks this Nuggets team fully healthy is capable of doing.
Just to do everything the right way. We know that we got a great team, and it's been a while since we had our full team. So I think when we're healthy, nobody in the league can beat us.
Coincidentally, the last stretch of games that the Nuggets had healthy was also 11 games. It was at the very beginning of the season. The Nuggets over that stretch were 9-2 and were beating teams by an average of 17 points. So I understand the sentiment that Peyton Watson is sharing there. They looked like a juggernaut. But that ultimate test was not in those 11 games. OKC was not one of those 11 games. And at best, we're going to really find out April 10th. And I say at best because with 2 games, that's the second to last game of the regular season. What's going to be decided by then? Are we going to get best on best? Are we going to get the full Thunder and the full Nuggets going head to head? We shall see. But it is very possible that despite these teams matching up 4 times during the regular season, we still can't be 100% sure how a series between these 2 teams is going to go. Now, I have my thoughts, and I have shared my thoughts. And I just don't think that the Nuggets, and I'll throw in the fact that they've been so banged up, I just don't think they're going to figure everything out in time. The rotations, the roles, getting everybody on the same page, the depth, the clutch time stuff. There's so many things that the Nuggets have a short time to figure out. I just don't know that they're going to be able to do it. And then if that happens, with hopefully an accurate view of how the Nuggets match up with the Thunder, then we can go from there, and the Nuggets can go from there and decide what they are ultimately missing to be able to take down the Thunder. But I can give my opinion, and I can feel very strongly about my opinion while still acknowledging that we haven't seen these 2 teams compete against one another in the form that we hope they will take in the playoffs. The Thunder are just getting Jalen Williams back now. So I think I'm going to end up being right. But all we've had to go on, even if you're on the other side and you agree with Peyton Watson, you still haven't measured that against Oklahoma City. In fact, the only team of real consequence when you're talking about the road through the playoffs that the Nuggets played in that 11-game stretch was Minnesota. They didn't play Houston. They didn't play San Antonio. So we didn't have the ideal scenario to kind of judge, which makes a potential series between these 2 teams certainly intriguing. And again, I think that the Nuggets have absolutely the right mindset. You lost to 2 teams in an 11-game stretch, and you look like a juggernaut. Why just because you lost to OKC a couple of times along the way when you didn't have your full complement of players, why should that all of a sudden wreck your confidence? I'm not blaming the Denver Nuggets for being confident. And hopefully we do get to see. It's looking like we'll see in the second round, but we want to see it. And the Nuggets want to see it because they got some big decisions coming up, Peyton Watson included. And if Peyton Watson's going to be a part of this team, who isn't going to be a part of this team? So I think the worst case scenario is not necessarily that the fully healthy Nuggets lose to the Oklahoma City Thunder. It's that the not fully healthy Denver Nuggets lose to the Oklahoma City Thunder, and then we can't fully know what the Nuggets need to take that next step. So, health permitting, they will be all together, and we will see them for this final 10 games. We'll see if they can get home court advantage in the first round, which I think would be a good thing. And we'll just, again, judge these 11 games like we judged the first 11. And when the playoffs roll around, we'll reconvene and decide what this Nuggets team is capable of. 719-247-1313. Take your thoughts on the fully healthy Denver Nuggets yesterday. Avalanche may be whole again, too, with the regular season nearing its end. Talk about that next on 740 KVOR and Extra Sports 1300. Tomorrow night, the Colorado Avalanche are on the ice taking on the Pittsburgh Penguins. Puck drop is at 5. It's actually a part of a double header because we'll have the Nuggets and Suns much later in the evening. 9 o'clock tip-off. How about that for the Nuggets and Suns? But it does allow you to consume both the Avs and Penguins and the Nuggets and the Suns without worrying about them overlapping. So there's that. But it starts with Avs Penguins puck drop just after 5 o'clock Tuesday night right here on Extra Sports 1300. Now, good news for the Nuggets to get back Peyton Watson for sure, but the team that got back the more significant piece to the puzzle on Sunday was the Avalanche, as Gabriel Landeskog returned after getting a puck to a sensitive area back on March 6th. This is a family show. Yeah, it was not a great injury for El Capitan. But anyway, he was back on Sunday and had one of the 3 goals the Avs would score in a 3-2 overtime win over the Capitals. Here's Jared Bednar on the importance of the return of El Capitan.
No, it's big. I mean, we talked about it before the game. Our record with him, without him is significantly different. And to get him back in the room, and that's, first game after 2 weeks off and limited activity. So we know he's only going to get better. But I thought, you need a big goal in a situation, and Marty comes up with the puck and finds Gabe, and he just has a knack for making a play when you need it, whether it's on the offensive side or defensive side. So it's good to have him back.
And to expand on that a little bit and to speak to how much better this team is with Gabriel Landeskog than without. This year, they win 84% of their games when Gabriel Landeskog is in the lineup. That reaches the threshold of being a wagon. Conversely, when they don't have him this year, they're winning 50% of their games. That's like, so with Gabriel Landeskog, the Colorado Avalanche are a wagon. Without him, they basically are a Pacific Division team. And the why is simple. And look, Jared Bednar got into it a little bit there. But one, he's a top-line player. And any team is going to have a big difference with that kind of a player on and off the ice. But it goes to who Gabriel Landeskog is beyond, a hockey player, who he is wearing that C. And it sounds cliche and it sounds corny, but there is a sport where wearing that C matters. And it's hockey. And Gabriel Landeskog embodies what that letter means more than maybe anybody else that wears it in the NHL. When he is out on the ice, when he is playing, the Avs just don't take a shift off. They don't take a night off. He just holds them accountable on every shift, even when he's not on the ice during that shift. And yesterday is a great example of this because the Capitals, like so many other teams, want to play a low event game against the Colorado Avalanche, right? Limit possessions, limit shots, which they did, right? No one wants to get into a track meet with the Colorado Avalanche. So when you play that kind of a game, and it's the lesson that Washington learned the hard way, but it's something that the Avalanche were able to do, every possession means that much more. It's even more important to make sure that you don't let a shift go by where maybe you left something to be desired. because you never know when those opportunities, they're going to be few and far between, but they're going to happen. And you got to be ready to pounce on it. And sure enough, the 2 goals that the Avs score in regulation were both off of Washington mistakes. Jared Bednar mentioned the one where Marty Necas is crashing on the forecheck. Logan Thompson, the goalie for Washington, has a terrible clearance. Necas gets it and feeds it to Gabriel Landeskog, who joined him on the forecheck. Very important that you join your teammates on the forecheck, and gets rewarded for it with the easiest goal he scored all year. Wide open net because Thompson was caught behind the goal. So when a team, and you give credit to the Washington Capitals at least this far, to say that most of that game was played on their terms. But from Washington's perspective, you got to make sure that you're buttoned up, because a team like Colorado is going to pounce on your mistakes. But for the Avalanche, it's not the game they want to play. It's a game that Gabriel Landeskog may be the best suited of anybody on the Avs to play. But his influence to get guys playing hard every shift, leaving it all out there, again, more cliches, but they're cliches for a reason. And that's why the Avs got rewarded with their 2 goals in regulation, because they stuck with the play, they stuck with the game, and they were able to take advantage of mistakes. And look, you could point to the last couple of years and say, the Avs did fine without Gabriel Landeskog, and I think that you would be somewhat accurate in that. I think there are 2 things that go along with that. One is that it's a very different thing to be completely without somebody than to be with them, then without them, then with them, then without them. Right? The Avalanche knew they weren't going to have Gabriel Landeskog, and they accounted for it. This year, because of what he showed when he returned from injury, they're like, we can depend on this guy. This guy can be a key cog for us. And he was. And then he went out. And then it was hard for the Avalanche to adjust. And then he came back. And then he got hit below the belt with a puck. And then he was out again. And the Avs have struggled a little bit as of late. And then the second thing, which is the bigger picture here, again, 84% of their games, they win with Gabriel Landeskog on the ice. The reason why they have been the leader the whole way through, wire to wire, in the Central Division and in the NHL, is because that's how much better Gabriel Landeskog makes them. You could say they got by without Gabriel Landeskog the last couple of years, and you're not 100% wrong, but were they as good as this team looks? I don't think so. So there's a lot of different things that make Gabriel Landeskog such an important piece to this team and makes the Avalanche so much better when he's out there on the ice. So now they're intact. They have a little bit longer than the Nuggets have. They got about 13 more games now. If they are intact, I don't see why they can't hold off Dallas. They're 5 points up with a game in hand. And Dallas can only take 2 points away from them when they meet not this Saturday, but the following Saturday. The Avs should be able to hold off Dallas. And because of the way Gary Bettman continues, for reasons that I cannot and will not understand, keeps the playoff format the way it is vitally important that the Avs hold off Dallas, because you want to play Nashville in the first round, and you want to await the winner of what is sure to be an epic 7-game series between Dallas and Minnesota. The consequence of winning the division is greater given how this season has played out than even in previous ones. And that's why Jared Bednar keeps talking about it. It's not just to keep his team pushing and give them a goal to strive for and make sure they're locked in for the duration of the season, but it's also because it carries real consequence if the Avs happen to fall off that top spot in the Central. And here's another thing, too, not just the fact that they get a much more advantageous first-round matchup if they win the division, but also with this goaltending question here. And it's not a goaltending question, I think, in the way of you're wondering if the Avs have the goaltending. It's who you going with. And you could say anecdotally, watching the games or empirically with the numbers, you can say that Scott Wedgwood has been the better goaltender. I still say that the Avalanche would like to have Mackenzie Blackwood be the guy in the playoffs. And Mackenzie Blackwood played very well yesterday. Here's Jared Bednar telling you the same thing.
Struggled at times during the game, like just trying to make plays, to see it, to create anything. I don't know if it was a lack of energy or whatnot. So you need to be good on the defensive side of it. Weren't great in the defensive side of it early in the game and got better as the game went on. And we needed some big saves, and Blackie gave us a chance to win. Give us a chance to get going and find a little bit of offense. And yeah, so I thought it was a really good performance from him.
And there's still time here, but what playing Nashville or whoever the last wild card is, as opposed to playing Minnesota or Dallas, allows you to do, let's say Jared Bednar just says Scott Wedgwood earned it. He was the better goaltender for this, that, and the other reason. He starts game one. Okay, let's say it goes poorly. Do you feel like the Avalanche are in real peril in that series if they lose game one? As opposed to they do that against Dallas or Minnesota round one, and now you've just squandered game one at home against either one of those two teams. It allows you to, and I don't know if Jared Bednar, and he'll never say it, he won't even say it the day of game one who his starter is going to be. But whatever Jared Bednar has in his head, it allows him to do that without the consequence of, gosh, if we lose game one to Minnesota or Dallas, we might be in a really bad spot. So whether it's Blackwood or Wedgwood, that Jared Bednar is leaning in a hypothetical game one that would start after these next 13 games, if for some reason it doesn't go the way he thought it would, you have time to recover and say, okay, we tried this for this reason, didn't work. We're going with the other guy, and it allows you to recover in a series that you wouldn't be as nervy if the Avs would have dropped game one. So not sacrificing everything. If somebody else gets hit with a puck below the belt, like, let them sit a few games. You don't Michael Malone this thing and sacrifice your viability as a playoff team by pushing guys too hard. But this is the carrot that Jared Bednar is dangling, and I think it's something that the Avs should definitely be looking to get. And also, too, the disappointment of leading the whole way and then squandering it in the last 13 games would be a little bit of a blow to morale. But I think they're in a good spot. And getting Gabriel Landeskog back makes them in an even better spot when you look at the schedule they have coming up. A lot of non-playoff teams and Pacific teams remaining on the schedule. Avs should be able to see this thing out. But you were reminded how much better this team is when the captain is on the ice. 719-24-7, 1313. More Drive Time Sports after this on 740 KVOR and Extra Sports 1300. I will never, ever let this go. What is going on right now in the Pacific Division in the NHL is a joke. It is an absolute joke. Not only would the Central get every possible playoff spot that they are allowed to get under the current rules, because as of right now, Utah and Nashville are the 2 wild cards, plus Minnesota, Dallas, and Colorado as the 3 automatic bids. The Pacific wouldn't even be really in it if they were in the East. Because I've seen something, and maybe you have too. The idea that every playoff team in the East has more points than every team in the Pacific. And I saw that and I said, well, wait a minute. We got to be a little bit fair here to the situation. Okay, the Pacific Division has to play the Avs and the Stars and the Wild far more than the East does. So could the Pacific be down this year just because they have to go up against the Central and not necessarily, like, I just didn't know if it was totally fair to poke fun at Edmonton and Vegas and Anaheim, although I don't know why you would poke fun at Anaheim. Like, they're a fun story. No one was expecting them. We're really talking about Vegas and Edmonton, traditional powers. I don't know if it's fair when they have to play the Central Division more than any team in the East does. But I looked into it. Vegas is 5-7-3 against teams that would be in the Eastern Conference playoffs right now. Edmonton is 7-9-2. They both have losing records against the East. So it's not just that their point total is lower. Head to head, they haven't fared well. In fact, the only team with an at least respectable record, and I'm talking top to bottom I'm not talking about just the best in the East. I'm talking about the teams that are currently in wild card spots. The only team with a respectable record is Anaheim, who is 3-3-1. Which, look, we've been talking about the imbalance in the NBA for years. Okay, the problem here is not that the Pacific head-to-head or just when you compare the two is not as good as the teams in the East. Okay, because we've been making that argument in the NBA, and nobody wants to – I don't think it's feasible to go 1 through 16. We're not doing that radical of a change and all that kind of stuff. The issue here, because I'm actually in some ways okay with the idea that the Pacific Division doesn't stack up well with the East. That just means, hey, if a Pacific team makes it out of the Western Conference, then I'm taking the team coming from the East. But the problem is the way that Gary Bettman does the playoffs. The problem is not East. Forget about the East. They're doing their own thing over there. It's what's going on in the West. About the seedings. About the fact that Minnesota and Dallas are going to be playing each other in the first round, and the winner of that will get Colorado. And 2 rounds in, we will be down to only one of the top 3 teams, not just in the West, in the entire NHL. You're supposed to have a tournament that sets up to have your best teams meeting later. And Gary Bettman and his argument is it generates more excitement for the playoffs. No, it just makes everybody angry. I haven't heard one proponent of the way the NHL does it. I know I certainly haven't heard anybody around here be a proponent of it. Who are these people saying, oh, we got to really, start off the NHL playoffs with a bang. And if we get to the Western and Eastern Conference Finals and we don't have the best team still left, then oh well. They're only the most consequential games of the season. Not a big deal. This is the problem. To not go 1 through 8 is completely and utterly nonsensical. It is an indefensible position that Gary Bettman has taken. And I, for the life of me, can't even crawl into his head to understand why he thinks this is a good idea. I don't know if he's going to be able to hold the line on this. There is more and more noise around this, and not just from people like me or people like you. It's the teams. Bill Guerin, general manager of both the Minnesota Wild and Team USA, speaking out against the absurdity of this. Jared Bednar has talked about, ask anybody associated with Dallas or Minnesota or Colorado, and they'll say it's absurd. All we're asking is 1 through 8. We're not asking 1 through 16 and let's throw the East in this. I'm not even saying I'm saying if the Pacific Division, we give the division winner the second overall seed, I'm actually not opposed to that. I'm okay with making divisions still matter. But you do that and you still seed 1 through 8. And you put all these Pacific teams at the bottom and make them play the Avs and the Stars, and let's try to build towards an epic matchup in the Western Conference Final, the way it is supposed to be. You're supposed to thin out the herd. You're not supposed to take out one of the alpha predators in round 1. But this is the way it will be this year. And meanwhile, the I won't say laughing stock, but certainly the butt of hockey fans' jokes right now, the Pacific Division will continue on. And even Connor McDavid, who plays in that division, is kind of joining in. He called what's going on in the Pacific a pillow fight, which speaks to how unserious that division race is. And while I agree with Connor McDavid, I was thinking to myself this weekend, if only there was a way that Connor McDavid could extricate himself from this pillow fight and go join a real fight in another division. Like, I don't know, like maybe becoming a free agent. Wouldn't that allow him to go elsewhere and be out of this unserious pillow fight that is the Pacific Division? And an organization in the Edmonton Oilers that keeps butting its head up against the wall in the Western Conference Final, or the Stanley Cup Final, excuse me. Doesn't he have a way to do this? I thought it was collectively bargained. And then I went and researched. It is. Free agency exists in the NHL. And what a coinkydink. Connor McDavid was supposed to be a free agent. All that lamenting that he did after the Oilers fell again to the Florida Panthers, it was shaping up to be the greatest free agent chase in the history of the sport. With Connor McDavid hitting the market, he is done with Edmonton. They can't win a Stanley Cup. He's going to make his services available to teams that can. And it would have been epic. But then Connor McDavid turns around, and before we even get to the season, signs an extension. He signs up for the pillow fight. He re-ups into the pillow fight. So while I agree with what he's saying, the other part of me is like, dude, you asked for this. Did you think that somehow there was, your general manager had an ace up their sleeve and suddenly they were going to come back with Dominik Hasek to be your goaltender? And by the way, by signing, you actually make it more difficult for Edmonton to get the help they need because they just have to rearrange these deck chairs on the Titanic by trading Stuart Skinner for Tristan Jarry, which, surprise, surprise, has yielded no better results. Look, I'm all for him getting his money, but he would get his money in free agency. And I'm not advocating for Connor McDavid to pull a Kevin Durant and join with like the Avalanche or something, or Dallas. But there are teams that are in a little bit better financial position that are up and coming. I mean, with what we've seen out of Detroit, out of Buffalo, out of Anaheim, could you imagine what Connor McDavid would do with those teams? With what those teams have already accomplished? And Anaheim's still in the Pacific Division. But with Anaheim's group and Joe Quenneville coaching them, plus Connor McDavid, it might be a 4-team race to get out of the Western Conference. But like that option was on the table. And loyalty is a virtuous trait, but dude, you keep coming out and criticizing your head coach and your organization, and you sound like you're about ready to quit. And there was an option where you could go off to greener pastures, and you didn't take it. And now, because he's under contract, he's going to have to demand a trade, which isn't a great look. And we don't want NHL to adopt the NBA culture. But now that's the only way that Edmonton is going to get the help they need is by getting rid of Draisaitl or McDavid. And it becomes that much harder for anybody to land Connor McDavid because he's under contract. So Edmonton doesn't feel the urgency to get rid of him because they're going to lose him in free agency. Like Connor McDavid forfeited a lot of his power. And he's going to have to resort to very drastic measures in order to extricate himself from Edmonton. But who could have seen this coming? The one team that's a surprise in a negative way is Vegas. Right? Of all those teams in the Pacific, Anaheim's actually a great story. San Jose's a great story. I'm not shocked that Edmonton is where they're at. And if I could see it coming, why didn't Connor McDavid? So again, I'm glad he's on our side here, but unlike me, I just yell into a microphone about the absurdity of what's going on. Connor McDavid actually can do something about it, not about the way that Gary Bettman sees the playoffs. And you know the great irony of all of this? It would not shock me if Edmonton ends up in the Western Conference Final again. Right? Because of the way Gary Bettman sees it. That a team where a guy says it's a pillow fight right now in the Pacific Division, Connor McDavid's fed up with his coach and his organization, and they still might make the Western Conference Final because they don't have to play Colorado, Minnesota, or Dallas. It's absurd. 719-247-1313. Coming up next, why, yes, Jalen Waddle helps out the Broncos immensely, but there's also some help to Waddle that's coming. Welcome in. Glad to have you. Whether you're listening to the show, KVOR, Extra Sports 1300, or whether you're watching the show on the social media platforms of those two fine radio stations, wherever you scroll, we can be found. This show can be found, and you can interact with this show. Just drop a comment on whatever social media platform you are on. And if you would like to text or call in, you could do that as well. We certainly encourage it. Hey, if you can get a letter delivered to me, I'll read it on air. This is an interactive experience. So interact how you see fit. 719-247-1313. The more I think about the addition of Jalen Waddle to the Denver Broncos, the more I believe that this is an absolutely perfect fit. Now, make no mistake about it. The ratio of who helps who more, Jalen Waddle helps out the Broncos more. Okay, but it's not to say that Jalen Waddle can't benefit with this move. We know that the Broncos' short passing game so many times is effectively their run game. And Jalen Waddle will help out immensely with that. But don't forget who he was playing with as a quarterback. And I made this, I said this about A.J. Brown, right? People were a little bit worried about adding A.J. Brown to the mix with the Denver Broncos. And A.J. Brown's big problem is Jalen Hurts. And I said, don't you think that A.J. Brown would be a little less disgruntled, a little more gruntled if he was playing with a better downfield passer of the football like Bo Nix? And I will take that argument and I will also apply it to Jalen Waddle, who is not disgruntled. He is extremely gruntled. But you don't think playing in this offense with this quarterback is a step up for Jalen Waddle? You know, Bo Nix, if you just look at his yards on average that he throws the ball, yes, he throws the ball short a lot, and Jalen Waddle will be the recipient of a lot of those short passes. But also, Bo Nix attempted 14 more passes of 20 or more yards than Tua did last year. 14 more. 10 more passes than Tua of 30 or more yards. And those are just attempts. And now a lot of those attempts are going to go to Jalen Waddle. And you don't think that's going to actually embolden Davis Webb to dial up bigger passing plays now that he has Jalen Waddle? So I would expect that number to grow even more for Bo Nix. And that's where Jalen Waddle can be really dangerous, can be elite for the Denver Broncos. And where his profile, in the way he's talked about amongst the other top tier NFL wide receivers, can improve, because those 20-plus yard, 30-plus yard passes down the field, those add on a lot of yards and lead to touchdowns. So as much as I think that the Broncos have to be the more thankful party in this arrangement than Jalen Waddle, that doesn't mean that Jalen Waddle can't be very excited about joining the Denver Broncos. If Sean Payton allowed press conferences in the offseason, I'm sure you would hear Jalen Waddle talk about how excited he is to play with the Denver Broncos. So it's just, Waddle is a perfect fit for what the Broncos do. But what the Broncos do is also a great fit for Jalen Waddle. And that's why you pay 3 picks and swap another pick to get this guy, is because it's a hand-in-glove fit that is going to make you better. But at the same time, Jalen Waddle, I think, is going to be happy playing in the Broncos offense. Or I should say more, because I like Mike McDaniel and I like his offense, playing with Bo Nix as opposed to Tua. And there's another aspect of this that just makes this such a good piece of business that George and Sean Payton were able to pull off. You know, today, Jackson Smith and Jigba signs a massive contract with the Seattle Seahawks. And the thing that everyone looks to is the total dollars. Right? That's what everyone looks to. That's what the agents want out there. And those numbers say Jackson Smith and Jigba is now the quote-unquote highest paid wide receiver in football. Which, given the year he had and the fact that he was the next one up, it's hard to argue. But I always look for a different number. And it doesn't grab the headlines as much as the total dollars or even the guaranteed money. Percentage of the cap. That is what's most important, most detrimental if you don't manage that the right way. That is managing the cap. The total dollars, the guaranteed money, you can move that around and all that kind of stuff. And you can move around the cap hit a little bit and the cap percentage. You can do that. But the cap percentage is really the most telling. And yeah, the Broncos had to restructure a couple of contracts to be able to absorb Jalen Waddle's contract. But you look in the wake of the signing of Jackson Smith and Jigba, Jalen Waddle's 11th among wide receivers in percentage of the cap. The next 2 years that he's going to be paid a lot of money. Don't get me wrong. He's going from like $24 million this upcoming season to, approaching $30 million the next year. Very lucrative contract and among the highest paid wide receivers in football. But the percentage of the cap is going to be around 8.5%, which is 11th. So the Broncos are getting a wide receiver of the caliber of Jalen Waddle, who is one of the top 10 receivers easily in the NFL. And you could creep up closer to top 5 than top 10, probably. But because of the fact that Miami signed him to the extension and the Broncos are bringing him in a year or two before he has to get paid again, they have like this 2-year window here where they can still add. I know, look, after the offseason that the Broncos have had, I understand that you might be a little bit maybe not believing that the Broncos are going to fully maximize their ability to add players, and I grant you that. I'm just saying the option is available. So for the next couple of years, you're still going to have Bo Nix on a rookie deal. Your best offensive player, who is now Jalen Waddle, is going to only take up about 8.5%, as opposed to 10, 11, 12, like the Jamar Chases, Jackson Smith, and Jigbas of the world. And if they can go to Cortland Sutton again and say, can we get that? Can we restructure your deal again? Which he's been amenable to do in the past. With some of the contracts that are going to be off the books. Ben Powers is one that's coming up. Zach Allen, I don't know how long he is for the Denver Broncos. The Broncos have the ability to not only keep this new core of players that they have together, and let's not forget on the defensive side with Nick Bonito and Pat Surtain, they can keep this group together for a couple years, see where that gets them, and if over the course of the next 2 years they assess the situation and say we're still not where we need to be, they would have the ability to go out and improve if they wanted to use it. If it was, quote unquote, their guy. Yeah, that's going to be a thing that prevails. And at least it got them Jalen Waddle. At least Jalen Waddle fit the profile. And Sean Payton was talking to Kay Adams, because of course he was. And he talked about how much he loved Jalen Waddle and his competitiveness. And of course, it is so Sean Payton that the people he consulted were Teddy Bridgewater, who he had in New Orleans, and Nick Saban. Like, it just makes it that much better of a fit on top of everything I just mentioned. The fact that Jalen Waddle appears to be a Sean Payton guy. He's not one of Sean Payton's guys because he hasn't coached him yet. But it doesn't seem like the Broncos just went out and said, who's the best player we can get? And there's something to be said for that. Now that they've actually made a move, if it was keeping them from making a move and they didn't make any moves, then it would cut the other way. But you can add somebody that presents so many benefits to your quarterback, to your offense, to your team, and you can also envision maybe being more productive in an offense like this, coupled with the fact that he's going to culturally be a really good fit with what the Denver Broncos do, which is Sean Payton law. And that's, again, why you pay the price that the Broncos did. The fit, the money, all of that stuff. I said this on Friday. I put Jalen Waddle, Trey Hendrickson as the two most significant upgrades any team has made this offseason, because I think it takes what those two teams are and makes them better. Whereas you look at and I keep using Kansas City as an example for obvious reasons. Kenneth Walker, yeah, great addition. Makes them better. Somebody they needed. Now what are you going to do about the defensive side of the football? I don't know that all told the Chiefs are necessarily that much better than they were a year ago right now. Still have the draft, and the Chiefs have a ton of draft capital. But right now, you can't say that the Chiefs have moved the needle, or the Chargers for that matter. What have the Chargers done? The Broncos have moved the needle in the most significant way. And you can say that right now they are better than the team that went to the AFC Championship last year, which they need to be. They need to be. You have to keep getting better. You can't stay the same, or else you will inevitably be worse. But I just keep looking at this addition of Jalen Waddle from a bunch of different angles, and I just think it's an amazing, amazing fit. Take your thoughts on it. 719-247-1313. Coming up next, let's all celebrate the Cinderella story that is the Texas Longhorns. Let's talk about the tourney a little bit. You enjoy it? Enjoy the first 4 days? How about the Cinderella story of this tournament, which unequivocally has to be the University of Texas Longhorns? I mean, who could have seen this coming? Despite all odds, those plucky underdogs, that 11 seed getting into the Sweet 16, all they needed was their own television network, the largest NIL budget in America, and the 10th largest student enrollment in the country. And they just took those things and with dogged determination made their way to the Sweet 16. That's what we have in terms of Cinderella in this tournament. And I would actually argue that Texas deserves more ridicule than they deserve praise. How do you not get a better seed? How are you just playing good basketball now, Sean Miller? You can buy literally anyone you want out of the transfer portal. You can pay to retain your own players. You have one of the best athletic departments in America. How did you end up an 11 seed? Why are you in the play-in? So no, they are not a Cinderella. I will not call them that. But what this means is that Cinderella, in her traditional form, has died. That's it. Back-to-back years now, no mid-majors in the Sweet 16. Cinderella, the way you came to know and love her, is dead. And it's going to just keep getting worse. Because if you keep looking at the seeding, you're going to see far more Texas A&Ms and LSUs and Big Ten teams that are on those 11, 12 lines, because when they expand, they're going to put all of those teams in. It's not going to mean more access for the mid-majors. This is a trend that, unless there are some sweeping changes in terms of NIL, and I would say more the transfer portal. Again, when I say the era of NIL, it's the transfer portal is hand in hand with it, and the transfer portal, I will defend this take till the end of my days on this earth. The transfer portal is a bigger problem than NIL. But the two things go part and parcel. They're hand in hand. But that doesn't mean that Cinderella hasn't taken a new form. This is a happy story. A type of Cinderella, a different type, but a type of Cinderella has actually emerged, and it's not Texas. As you are probably familiar with the fairy tale of Cinderella, the whole point of Cinderella is she was beautiful all along. She just needed to get to the ball, and you would see how beautiful she is. The new Cinderella is also beautiful, but they've had some work done. Different kind of beautiful, but beautiful maybe nonetheless. Allow me to explain. Nebraska is the Cinderella of this tournament, just as Indiana was in football this year. These are the new Cinderellas. Big schools that decided the heck with this sport that we love more than anything else. It's not working. We're throwing everything at it. Indiana with basketball, Nebraska with football. None of it's working. Nebraska tried to bring in Patrick Mahomes mini-me, and it didn't work. So they said, you know what? We got this money because people in Lincoln, in the state of Nebraska, are crazy about their sports. Same as Indiana. And Indiana's got a lot of deep-pocketed donors. And whether it's Hoiberg and Signetti, whether it's the athletic director, the head of the collective, whoever it is, somebody got to the people that control the purse strings and said, could I interest you in a different investment opportunity? You've been trying every which way, scratching off checks to whatever you can to make Indiana basketball great and to make Nebraska football great. May I interest you in Indiana football and Nebraska basketball? And then you get the right guys at the helm, Hoiberg and Signetti, and you see the result. These are still good stories. And I know me touting Nebraska as a good story in this state, I understand how it hits your ear. I wish it was not Nebraska. I wish it wasn't, but it is. There's still a good story, just like Indiana was, because they were down so long. They were irrelevant. And now here they are emerging on the national stage. That is a great story. It's not the story that we're accustomed to, and it may not be the most preferred story. We may have liked the Cinderella better the old way. But this is the reality of college athletics. The Cinderella that you grew up loving, that fairy tale is even more of a fairy tale now. It's not, I'll even go so far as to say, it's not possible. It's not possible because even if you see like High Point, for example, maybe you've heard about High Point, not just what they are on the court, but what their school is. Take a look if you have some spare time. It is worth your time. High Point is a wild place. It's almost like Grand Canyon here in our part of the United States. Like it's a little bit different than your average institution of higher learning. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying it's different. Even if High Point all of a sudden starts to make repeated runs in the tournament, it will be because they are playing by the same rules that Nebraska and all these other schools are. They will still not be the traditional Cinderella that you're accustomed to. Cinderella has to pay her way into this ball. But if you accept that reality to some extent, then you can appreciate what is going on at a Nebraska or what happened in football with Indiana. They're still not the most evil stepsister. Right? Nebraska isn't doing it with what Texas is working with. Indiana isn't doing it the way Georgia is doing it. So they're still worth at least a compliment, if not praise. And I think that they're in this new world of especially college basketball. This is what we get for Cinderella. Take it or leave it. Because unless, to use another fairy tale character, unless the genie is put back in the bottle here with a lot of this stuff, it's not changing. And one of the preeminent coaches in college basketball right now, Tommy Lloyd, who is at the Cinderella in Gonzaga and is now at Arizona, he understands this metamorphosis that has gone on with college basketball better than anyone else.
I think that parity is great for the game, but things change. And, I think once, finances become part of it, there's going to be a breaking point for some of the lesser programs that just don't have the finances. And I think that's just a obvious statement. So, there's lots of reasons I took the Arizona job. And one of them was kind of forecasting these changes happening, because right when I was getting the job, the NIL deal was rumored, and then it started in July. And I figured Arizona's a place that has a pretty strong, long basketball tradition, and they're going to be excited to invest in basketball, and we have.
It's the Brad Pitt line from Moneyball: adapt or die. Unfortunately, in order to even be able to adapt, there's a price tag associated with it. That, as Tommy Lloyd is saying, a lot of schools just aren't going to be able to do it. And I guess where I come down on all of this is I'm a little conflicted about the whole thing. If I'm being honest, I appreciate what's going on, and I understand the need to evolve. And look, I know that upsets and mid-majors are a big part of what makes the tournament great, right? And that's the part you lament, is that it's moving away from those things. But all told, I thought we got 4 days of pretty good basketball. You know, the St. John's, Kansas game, that was a great basketball game. And the mid majors did provide some of that. It's just ultimately they didn't win. And one thing I do despise is people saying, "Oh, we're only 2 minutes away from Siena being there." Like, there's no more irrelevant first part of a game in any sport than basketball. Like, it's all those last couple minutes. So you say, "Oh, if Siena just would have held on." Well, the fact that they didn't exposes the difference between themselves and Duke. Right? It's like the meme of that Liverpool fan when he's saying Sadio Mane is the best player in the world. I don't deal in ifs, buts, or maybes. I deal in absolutes. If your aunt had something, they'd be your uncle, but she doesn't, so she's not. The mid-majors, yeah, they were involved in some really good games, but they didn't win, which is the point, which is what we love. And so I say that, and I'm lamenting what the death of Cinderella. I am, but that doesn't mean I can't appreciate some of where college basketball is going, because I do think Nebraska is a great story. I thought Indiana was a great story during the college football season. It's different. It may not be better. It may not be. But it's just the reality, because all of this, I know it's run amok, and they botched this so horribly to create what they have created. But it is born out of something that a lot of people were proponents of, including me, which is athletes getting compensated for their name, image, and likeness. That put a price tag on being competitive in college athletics. It just did. Now, they took it and twisted it and contorted it and made it into something it wasn't intended to be. But still, many people were proponents of money being infused into college athletics. So it's not what I love most. I didn't enjoy the last two tournaments, or last tournament and a half, as it were, as much as I've enjoyed others in the past. I don't think this is better. But there's some charm even in this tournament and last year's tournament. And a kind of Cinderella does still exist, as long as they have the money to get their work done. Basically, this Cinderella is a Kardashian. That's kind of what I'm getting at. 719-247-1313. More after this. Taking your thoughts at 719-247-1313. We'll hit the biggest stories of the day coming up at the top of the hour. For now, a couple of topics introduced that are also significant in nature, like the death of Cinderella as we know her in the NCAA tournament. I say a different type of Cinderella has emerged that you can learn to love. Not the way you did the last kind of Cinderella, but it's what you got. This text come in from the 719. What are you going to say when all the Division II transfers in Iowa beat Nebraska? Iowa's a great one. But, like, let's not forget recent history with Iowa. They did go through a stretch where they made the tournament 7 out of 10 years under Fran McCaffrey. So the reason I bring up Nebraska is because they've been down. But I would think Iowa knocking off Florida is a great story and is this new type of Cinderella story. But Iowa has a long, proud basketball tradition, and they've been good a lot. But you hit on kind of exactly my point. Like, I throw out Nebraska. And look, Nebraska, of their 5 leading scorers, one is the coach's kid. One is a local kid from Lincoln, so good on them. And the other 3 are transfers, 2 of them from mid-majors. Like, they're playing this game. But they're playing the game to get themselves out of irrelevancy. For Iowa, yes, they're having to do it. They are similar to Indiana as well. That they are using the portal, but they are being very targeted with who they bring out of the portal. I saw their head coach talking about the type of player he's looking for at Iowa, and it reminds me a lot of Kurt Signetti at Indiana. But that is where you appreciate these stories that are emerging. You know, the Dukes and the Floridas and some of these other schools, it's just like, you know, they're just going to get the best players. I don't know. And Florida's just going to get an 8-foot tall dude for no reason. Just because he's 8 feet tall and they can. But Iowa's another one. Doesn't have the resources. And that's what I'm saying. College athletics is like baseball. It's like Major League Baseball. Okay, there's no salary cap. Right? So the highest spending teams are going to win unless you're Texas, and then you sandbag for most of the season, and all of a sudden now we're supposed to fall in love with Sean Miller's team. Like, there's a pay to play here, but within that ecosystem, there are some teams that are the Oakland A's and the Tampa Bay Rays and the Baltimore Orioles more recently. That, yeah, they're not the Yankees and the Red Sox and the Dodgers. The Mets, who just spend their money stupidly. Like, it's a different kind of, before it was, you know, the big schools, the power schools against the mid-majors. Now it's going to be the richest power schools against the less rich power schools. That's where it's going. And if you want to continue to love these sports, then those are the stories, the Iowas, the Nebraskas, that you get behind and say they're doing it with less. They're still doing it more than High Point. but they're doing it with less than some of the teams that they have to go up against night in and night out. Tom says, I will not learn to love a Kardashian Cinderella. Not going to happen. And that's, look, you may not want to. And I don't begrudge you. But the reality is that's who you might have to gravitate toward, or you'll be out on this tournament. Because those other Cinderella stories, they don't exist anymore. On the topic of the absurdity of the way the NHL does their playoffs, Albert says, when in the history of the NHL playoffs has the best team not won? Bednar and Guerin are only yipping because their job performances are judged based on how far they go in the playoffs. This year is going to be a brawl. Buckle up your chin straps and let's enjoy. You know, I enjoy things while complaining. It is maybe my superpower that I can love something but also complain constantly about it. I'm not saying it's one of my better traits, but I'm saying I do it very well. I'm not saying that this format does not ultimately crown the best team, but there is a normal progression that we like to go through. And I don't think that the way the NHL does it is preferable or more enjoyable. I really don't. I want the best teams playing with the biggest stakes on the line. I think that's the best way to do it. I think the way NHL is doing it is wrong. But yes, the end result is still going to be the same. And not even Gary Bettman can ultimately ruin the greatest postseason in all of sport. Even he can't completely ruin it, but he can take away from it. He can make it less awesome, and that's exactly what he's done. And yes, everybody has their own. I mean, even I do. I don't know if I was on, Vegas talk radio or Edmonton talk radio, I might be effusive in my praise of Gary Bettman. We all have our own biases and our own motives for having the opinions that we do. So you're not wrong when you point out Bill Guerin and Jared Bednar's reasonings, but that doesn't mean that they're wrong. It just means what are you saying this for? And I admit being in the Central Division, but I'm sticking up for Dallas and Minnesota. I think Colorado's going to be okay. I mean, they're going to get the top seed. They're going to play Nashville. That's fine. But I am sticking up for the Central Division. If I was in the Pacific Division, then maybe I would have less of a problem. I understand that. It's not I'm always a proponent of things can be good, but they can always be better. Things can always be better. Brett says, regarding the Nuggets, Peyton Watson is a key component to their future success this season. Yes, but with the second unit. But I want to play something again from David Adelman. See if you, and maybe I have a tinfoil hat on, but listen to what David Adelman said about Peyton Watson. And see if you arrive at a conclusion about his future with the team and maybe at the expense of someone else.
Playing 3-on-3 and 5-on-5 with coaches is not the same as playing against the Blazers and Drew Holiday picking you up full the first time you touch the ball. So, no, I thought he was good. He was aggressive, got to the paint. I loved the 6 rebounds, the 3 assists. I think the more he has the ball and gets in the paint, the more experience he has doing that, I think the assist totals will go even higher because he really does bring 2-3 people with his length and the way he can finish.
Right there. Right there. Is it just me? Like, I'm honestly asking the question. Is it just me, or does in the future not just mean the next 11 games and however many playoff games? It sounds like David Adelman is talking about the long-term future of Peyton Watson. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. 719-247-1313. You can let me know. But when I heard that, I'm like, has the ball in his hands more, gets into the paint more of Peyton Watson? Maybe he just means this year. And here's where I'm going with this. Okay, if the Denver Nuggets season ends short of what they wanted to accomplish, right? It will be easier to perhaps make more drastic changes to the roster. And I can tell you this unequivocally, the guy writing the checks wants to put an actual dollar amount, doesn't want to hand his organization a blank check. So the idea of running it back will be almost impossible if the Denver Nuggets don't win a title. That's the only argument that you can make, is that we won a title. We need every single one of these players. And look, the cap is the cap, and it might be impossible anyway. But do you hear a little bit of the Calvin Booth in David Adelman? How projectable Peyton Watson is? What I'm leading to is this. Nuggets lose. Do they do with Peyton Watson and Aaron Gordon what they did Christian Brown, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope? Do they make the argument that is more fiscally responsible and better for the long-term future of the organization to keep Watson at the expense of Aaron Gordon? Now, there's a middle ground here where maybe you're dealing Cam Johnson in a salary dump. So it could just be that. There are a lot of different options here. But when I heard that from David Adelman, I'm like, I don't think he's just talking about the rest of this season. I think it very well could be. Peyton Watson's, and I've discussed this before, the idea of you move on from Cam Johnson, but you still put yourself in a really tricky cap spot by signing Peyton Watson. I don't know if the Nuggets can get to where Papa Kroenke would want them to be by simply jettisoning Cam Johnson and signing up Peyton Watson. I don't think the changes will stop there. And I'm not saying that he's propping up Peyton Watson. Like, I think what we have seen from him piques your curiosity, makes you want to see more of him. And we get these 10 more games. We get the playoffs. We'll see what the new, quote unquote, new Peyton Watson is for the Denver Nuggets. And then we'll have the discussion when the time comes. But I'm not saying David Adelman's making a sell job. I think he might be actually speaking to how much he and the organization value Peyton Watson. 719-247. 1313. Coming up next, we'll talk about Peyton Watson's return and also Gabriel Landeskog's. Hello there. Welcome in Drive Time Sports. Appreciate you listening, whether it's on 740 KVOR, Extra Sports 1300, or the streaming platforms of those two fine radio stations. Those apps widely available are free to download, free to use, and are sponsored by Diversus Health, mental health and well-being for all. You can also watch the show anywhere that you scroll. If you'd like to take your participation level to the next level, you can call or text the show 719-247-1313 or just drop a comment wherever you are scrolling. Perhaps you have a thought or two on these, which are the three stories driving the show today. All right, we start with our local teams being whole again. Let's start with the Nuggets, says story number one.
Murray, alley-oop, got two hands! Spencer Jones, timeout Portland. Denver's running all over the Blazers here in the third quarter, in the fourth quarter.
Altitude Radio on the call. The Nuggets with Peyton Watson completing the puzzle, boat race the Portland Trailblazers 128-112. Now, there will be bigger games, to quote Sean Payton. There will be more difficult opponents for this newly healthy Denver Nuggets team to take on, but it was the best way possible to get everyone back together. It was extremely entertaining game. The ball movement was great. Everybody contributed except Jonas Valanciunas, who didn't get to play, so that's not really his fault. That was a coach's decision, though. He's healthy. Look, and getting Peyton Watson back gives the Nuggets more depth, more in their second unit. We know that the rotation is going to be somewhat restricted even for the postseason, but Peyton Watson, with the way he was playing, I think needs to be a key contributor off the bench for the Denver Nuggets if they're going to advance as far as they would like to in this NBA playoffs that are coming up in now 10 games. But this smaller, let's just call it smaller lineup, not small lineup, David Adelman's kind of found something with them. They help key the comeback against Toronto, which is a far more consequential win than beating Portland, with all due respect. And adding Peyton Watson to that mix does make them extremely versatile. And the whole point of this offseason was for the Nuggets to get deeper, and getting Peyton Watson back makes them a deeper basketball team. Now, to get everybody on the same page, everyone productive in their roles, figuring out the end of basketball games and consistently, basically overall, the consistency of the Denver Nuggets in all forms and fashions is what I question on whether they can ultimately beat Oklahoma City, because Oklahoma City's good. Now, I don't just mean they're good like they're a good team, because they are, but they don't have the consistency issues that the Denver Nuggets have had throughout this season. And a lot of it is due to health. I grant you, not saying they don't have a good excuse for some of it. But I just ultimately think against the best that this league has to offer, the reigning champions, and a team that the Nuggets haven't been able to figure out this season, it will come back to bite them. But at the very least, you got to see this team at full strength. They got to at least take that shot at Oklahoma City. The worst scenario is that they don't stay healthy between now in what appears to be a second-round series with Oklahoma City, and then we don't even know for sure. If this team, as currently constructed, stays healthy, gets to that series, and loses, at least you know. At least you could point out, all right, this needs to be better. This guy could probably go. This guy needs to stay. You can truly assess the situation. If somebody gets hurt between now and then you don't really have an accurate picture of how the Nuggets stack up with OKC. But I think in the short term, at least this gives the Nuggets a chance to climb up to the 4 seed at the very least, get home court in the first round, and really set themselves up to match up with OKC in the following round and not have to mess around too much in that first round series. So Peyton Watson, 14.6 rebounds back in his first game since February 4th. Nuggets roll, and they will be back in action tomorrow night, first night of a back-to-back, because that's what the Nuggets do, all back-to-backs. Phoenix tomorrow, Dallas on Wednesday. Here's story number 2.
Natchez all the way through, looking for a pass in front for Taves, not available. Natchez still with the puck, cuts to the dot, throws it back door. Brock Nelson shoots and scores. It's Brock o'clock. His 6th game-winning goal of the season, and the Avalanche win in overtime.
Connor McGahey on the call again for Altitude Sports. Brock Nelson was the hero ultimately, but the story, I think, yesterday in the 3-2 win over the Washington Capitals was the captain returning after what has to be one of the most unfortunate injuries in the history of sport. To be hit below the belt by a puck fired by your own teammate has to be the worst injury you can ever sustain. But Gabriel Landeskog has made it back, and he was impactful in his first game back. Scored one of the 3 goals the Avs scored, and 84% of the time that the Avs have played this season with Gabriel Landeskog on the ice, they've won. 84% of the time, it works every time. Gabriel Landeskog is what has taken the Colorado Avalanche from being one of the elites to the elite. All season long, they have been the elite team. Gabriel Landeskog is what gives them that. Not just because he is a top 6, arguably top 3 player, but also what he brings in the intangibles. And yesterday was a great example, because when Washington makes that a low event game, they don't want to get up and down the ice with the Colorado Avalanche. Fewer shots, less puck possession. Each possession means more. You can't afford to take a shift off. And I thought that the Colorado Avalanche, despite obvious frustration from them, stuck with the game plan and were able to pounce on 2 Washington turnovers and score their goals. And Gabriel Landeskog was in the middle of one of them. But that stick-to-itiveness is something that he brings to the table, and he holds the other guys accountable in doing that. So I thought yesterday was a perfect game to have Gabriel Landeskog come back in, because it embodies so much of what he brings to the table. The skill, yes, but the leadership and how hard he plays is something that the Avalanche are always better having him on the ice. And now, hopefully, over the last 13 games of their season, they can have Gabriel Landeskog along with everybody else, and they can hold off Dallas as that lead sits at 5 points with 1 game in hand. And again, 13 games to go for the Avs till their postseason. Here is story number 3.
I think that parity is great for the game, but things change. And, I think once, finances become part of it, there's going to be a breaking point for some of the lesser programs that just don't have the finances. And I think that's just a obvious statement.
That is Arizona coach Tommy Lloyd with the obvious statement in reaction to what has to be the biggest story of the NCAA tournament so far, which is that Cinderella is dead. Or at least Cinderella in the form that you and I have grown to love her in. Right? And Tommy Lloyd speaks with authority. He came from the ultimate Cinderella in Gonzaga. And he's like, I'm out of here. And took the job at Arizona because he saw what was coming. Now, you lament that. I lament that. I thought that this weekend and last tournament lacked compared to tournaments past because those mid-majors, which are the true Cinderellas, it's not the number next to their name. It's what school they are, where they come from. Have you heard of them before? That's what goes into being a Cinderella. And those teams were all lopped off pretty much by the weekend. And that sucks. It does. But that doesn't mean that there isn't a new form of Cinderella that is worth appreciating. And I think the team that embodies that the most are the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Yes, they are still a big brand. You know them. They play in a major conference. They have NIL money. That is the price to play. The price to pay to play in college sports now. But they can turn out to be like an Indiana was in football, where you say, yes, they have far more resources and are paying for the roster that is getting them as far as they've gotten, which is different than what High Point and Cal State Bakersfield and all of these other schools that have gone by the wayside early in this tournament have. But they still don't have Florida's resources, Texas's resources, Duke's resources, Kansas's resources. They're still an underdog. They're still the Cinderella in that story. And I think it is worth appreciating. And I think you can do both. You can pine for the old days being 2 years ago. You can pine for those days, which I am, while still appreciating some of what you saw over the first 4 days of the tournament. I don't think it's better by any stretch, but that doesn't mean that there isn't some charm to some of these schools that are remaining in the Sweet 16, even though pretty much every single one of them has far more resources than what we would consider traditional Cinderellas. 719-247-1313. Take your thoughts on the three stories that are driving the show. More Drive Time Sports next on 740 KVOR and Extra Sports 1300. Now, the other part of the Tommy Lloyd clip that I play during What's Driving the Show, he says that he has no answer to how to fix it. So part of what I'm saying about this new kind of Cinderella, it's just the reality that has to be accepted because the brightest minds in the sport, the thought leaders in this sport, have no clue how to reverse this course. And I would also, and I don't have a problem with Tommy Lloyd personally. I don't know how motivated he is to change it. I know he has affinity for the mid-majors because he came from Gonzaga, but in his current spot, how motivated is he to change it back? And I even hear people like Tom Izzo and John Calipari, and I appreciate a lot of what they say, but again, I mean, they're in a great spot. They could lament how wrong everything's gone and half wished that it wasn't this way, but they're in the right spot. And meanwhile, you have Randy Bennett, longtime coach at St. Mary's. He's going to Arizona State now. And Jared Calhoun, the head coach at Utah State, which was positioned going into the weekend as a potential Cinderella, like a legitimate Cinderella in many ways. They lose, and he's off to Cincinnati. That was a really missed opportunity by me there. Did you catch that? He's on to Cincinnati. Dang it. That's why you write things down before you say it, Ryan. That would have been great. The old Bill Belichick line. But he's now Jared Calhoun's going to be the head coach at Cincinnati. And there was a really good article by, I believe it was Dan Wolken of Yahoo. And I think he points out, I think he minimizes some of the culprits here. That, you know, NIL, the transfer portal, all of that kind of stuff, and holds up another reason. I think it's everything because it's just this era. So most people like me throw out NIL more. I say more so the transfer portal is the problem. But he throws out conference realignment. You know, so many of these schools and some of these schools that were positioned to maybe be a Cinderella, they've joined up with the big boys. They're sitting at the big boys table now. And taking it with them is the ability for there to be more potential Cinderellas because more bids are going to those conferences. Then look at the Mountain West. Mountain West got one team. That's it. It's not even a real Mountain West team because now Utah State's going to the Pac-12. But they got one bid. Before conference realignment, and I think Dan Wolken is right on this, you had an environment where the talent was a little bit more spread out. There was a little bit more respect that had to be put on the names of some of these lesser conferences because they had multiple good teams. Now the good programs, the ones that can play in the NIL world, are moving to the bigger conferences. So it's kind of destroying that mid-major class, because anytime a mid-major over the last few years it shows how good they are, you get scooped up. And I don't blame them because if you're not to the Big Ten or the SEC here soon, you're going to be in big trouble. You're going to be left out. So in the meantime, you can stop over in, the Big East, or when it comes to basketball, obviously, or the Big 12 or the ACC. But every team that's in those two conferences is just waiting for the right moment to try and join up with the Big 10 or the SEC. So I think he's right, but it's all tied together. Right? It's this era of college athletics that we are going through, that all the good players from the smaller schools are being taken away and going to the bigger schools with the money that they have in NIL, and they're not being punished for transferring multiple times over the course of their college career. Coaches have forever been poached. So that's not new, but that's happening still. So the good coaches are being taken. The good players are being taken. And now the whole programs are being lifted up and boosted. So even the ones that can kind of maybe reload, even if they lose guys, no matter. They're playing in the SEC of the Big 10 now. Or at least the ACC, Big 12, etc. I mean, it's all of it. I don't know that you can hold up one as the biggest issue, and I still say it's the transfer portal. But no matter which one you hold up as the biggest reason, they're all tied together. They all feed one another. You need the NIL to get the guys out of the transfer portal. How do you get more NIL? Move to a bigger conference. Hey, CSU alumni, we're going to the Pac-12 now. We need your support. Or before that, CU, we're going to Big 12. We're going back to the Big 12 now. We're not in the Pac-12 anymore. We need your support. It's a rallying cry for alumni. We're going big time. We need you. So it all feeds into one another. It's not better, for a lot of reasons. And also college basketball is unique because in football, I think you are okay with little brother not getting a seat at the table, or at least more than you let on, because especially when it was 4 teams, it's like, you really want to, there's 4 teams. Can we just make it the best 4 teams? Do we have to give access? Even as it's expanded, I don't know that there's as much of an appetite. I think a lot of people are okay with, in a smaller pool, there being the preeminent programs in the big brands. The college basketball tournament is completely different. It's its own thing. So we could talk about the impact of all these things on each sport, and it's all different. With college basketball, this tournament, I think the Cinderella, the mid-majors are such an integral part. They've never been really an integral part of the college football championship. When it was 4 teams, or even in the last couple of years when it's expanded, there's a couple here and there, and we kind of want those smaller schools to have access. But this has been the case for college basketball forever. And that's why it's been this shock to the system the last couple of years that the mid-majors are completely being squeezed out of this, because we accept them as normal and what we want. Nobody knows how to fix it, or at least nobody knows a way to fix it. It's one thing we could say, I think this was suggested the other day by the leader of the free world, What did he say? Just go back to the way it was? I mean, there's some merit to that, but also how? Like maybe there's a lot of public sentiment for that. You know what? All this was a mess. Let's just put the toothpaste back in the tube. Let's just get in the time machine, go back a couple years, and don't agree to any of this stuff. How are you going to be able to do that? Because there are courts that have ruled it's the law of the land that some of these things exist. And look, I appreciate the most powerful people in our country taking an interest in this and wanting to try and make it better. Like I appreciate that. But I kind of need to know how it's going to happen and how you could undo all of this. Because I don't think you can. I'm not I don't have a law degree. I'm not a constitutional professor or anything, but I think some of this is like done. But at the same time, how epic was the college football playoff championship game? How epic were some of these basketball games over the weekend? Like, is it ruined forever and it's terrible and it's the worst thing ever? Or is it just not as good as it used to be? I think I can live with not as good as it used to be. If we get, better games and we can still get some of these stories like a Nebraska in there to say, all right, they're not like these other teams. There's some redeeming qualities to them. I just think it's different. I'm very anti little guy when it comes to college football playoff. I don't think there are enough good teams in it, but this college basketball tournament, it's just a completely different animal. It's a little bit harder to be that way because part of the allure of this tournament are the mid-majors, are Cinderellas. So I think it's a little bit more difficult for college basketball to figure this thing out than maybe college football. 719-247-1313. Coming up next, you will not hear a better example of the commentator's curse than the one that came from yours truly this weekend. So this weekend, the Switchbacks lost their first match of the season to Orange County, and I can't help but feel somewhat responsible. No, I did not play in the game. I did something far more impactful. I called the game. If you don't believe that the commentator's curse exists, may I present to you me on Saturday night? I mean, you would think that Orange County would be somewhat disappointed to have another draw, especially one here at home, but the way this game has gone, I don't think they have a choice but to accept a draw as a decent outcome and thoroughly outplayed tonight by Colorado Springs. That situation like this, they could steal a goal here at the end. Pass blocked by Juan Tejada, still ends up in the 18, and of course Orange County scores. That one bounced right to, was that Zuback, who then fired it past his former teammate Colin Shuttler. Oh, man. I mean, I stand by everything I said. The Switchbacks did control that entire match. And it was getting very late. And I did not see the ability of Orange County to score unless they just happened to steal one off of a set piece. Bada bing, bada boom. That's exactly what happened. So Switchbacks fans, Switchbacks players, the coaching staff, the entire organization, from the bottom of my heart, I'm sorry. Did not mean for this to happen. Oh, that was a gut punch of a loss, wasn't it? Ugh. I just don't know how. I mean, I saw what happened. I was watching it on how Orange County scored their goal, but I think the bigger thing that maybe the Switchbacks will lament is how they didn't get on the board sooner. Because moments like that can happen. Even a game that you're controlling, something like that can happen, which is why I acknowledge that it could happen. But if you're up a goal, or maybe two, that doesn't end up ultimately deciding the match. So, that one's on me. It's my bad. But I'll tell you this. If the Switchbacks, if I keep my mouth shut and the Switchbacks continue to play that way, there are not going to be many nights where they're going to lose. They played easily their most complete game. And it's hard to say that when they lose, but it's the truth. From beginning to end, yes, it wasn't complete, right? There was that one moment, wasn't a perfect game. End to end, that was their best performance of the year. But it sucks that you got lose it on something like that. Switchbacks, though, right back at it on Saturday afternoon against New Mexico. So a chance to make things all better. Can't promise I won't say things that could lead to commentators' curses. And you may be thinking like, oh, come on, Ryan, don't be so self-important. If you're in the Switchbacks community, I'll just tell you, I have been getting blamed for so much over the years. I've gotten blamed for so many goals that have been conceded because of commentators' curses. So you don't quite get it. if you're in the switchbacks community, you understand, and you probably one of the people who has given me grief over the years. Call it like I see it. I tell the truth. That's what I do. So that wasn't great. This coming in from Chris as we talk about the death of Cinderella and mid-majors and all that kind of stuff, says Gonzaga is not a mid-major. They were the original mid-major. That's what I said. They were the original mid-major. Right? They had all of these runs and they were able, and they're the exception to the rule. Right? They were a mid-major that turned themselves into, for my generation, maybe one of the bluest blue bloods there is. But there was a time, their beginnings were as a mid-major. And Mark Few built that thing up, playing in not one of the power conferences, and built it up to be one of the preeminent programs. But like Tommy Lloyd knows what mid-major basketball looks like. He understands the plight of a mid-major. Now, he had it better at Gonzaga than other mid-majors. But my point is, he understands and has an affinity for mid-majors because of where he came from. And Gonzaga, in terms of where they play, yes, they are considered a mid-major. But in terms of their success, they are not. I understand that. I'm just saying that Gonzaga was the team that played themselves, and they're still going to be playing at the mid-major level. Could you argue that the Pac-12 is a step up from the WCC? Sure. Still mid-major. So I get what you're getting at, Chris. But my point was more that Tommy Lloyd has a soft spot for mid-majors. And yet is probably not overly motivated to do anything to significantly help them. No rev share is coming from Arizona anytime soon. How's your bracket doing? Good? By the way, I picked Tommy Lloyd in Arizona to win, so we'll see if that ends up coming to fruition. That's about the only thing still on the table for Ryan's predictions for this NCAA tournament. But it continues on Thursday with the Sweet 16. And look, this mid-major stuff, it is a first weekend of the tournament conversation. Because as the tournament goes on, yeah, maybe we'd like to see some of the Cinderellas still there, but we really start to hone in on, okay, UConn, St. John's, who can really win this thing. So I think some of the heat that's on the NCAA tournament right now, it will cool off a bit as we get further into the tournament, because we don't just simply expect that many Cinderellas to remain into the Sweet 16, into the Elite Eight, and into the Final Four. So much for the Denver Nuggets having 10 more games fully healthy to figure things out. Peyton Watson is out for tomorrow. Now, don't panic. It is his injury management. So this is load managing Peyton Watson as he makes his way back fully from the injury. My guess is he will play the second night of the back-to-back, which is in Dallas. But the Nuggets will not. The fact of the matter is the Nuggets won't be whole tomorrow night. So they were yesterday. They won't be tomorrow night, maybe again on Wednesday. And that's been the other part of this that's leading to the inconsistency around the Denver Nuggets this season, is even when they get guys back, they're not like back. And it's something David Adelman's talked about. Like Aaron Gordon comes back, he can only play so many minutes, and then they tried to put him out of the second night of a back-to-back, and he injures himself again, and everybody kills David Adelman for playing him. So now they bring him back, and they don't play him on the second night, on one night of the back-to-back, and they do limit his minutes. But then if anything bad happens, like the Nuggets lose or in crunch time, they come up short, then it's like, well, the Nuggets can't figure things out. I don't envy the position that David Adelman is in. I will say that. And I'm not sitting here saying his job has been made easy. But it is ultimately his job to figure it out. The guys in and out of the lineup, and then when they're in, they're not really in, they're actually out. So, no Peyton Watson tomorrow night for the Denver Nuggets. This also bad news based on a conversation we had earlier. The NBA has announced that the salary cap is going to be lower than they anticipated it to be. Already, I think that the Nuggets are seriously looking at cutting costs when it comes to their contracts this upcoming offseason. I think that's happening. It's just a matter of how deep are the cuts. And now the salary cap is going to be lower than they projected it to be. A whopping, this coming from Shams Charania, a whopping $1 million less. Like that's Nikola Jokic. He's gone. That $1 million, that I shouldn't even speak such things into the universe. I'm sorry. Did I not learn my lesson from the Switchbacks game this weekend? It is not much. It's $1 million less than they projected it to be, which I believe is still an increase from this year. But I'm just telling you, you heard it here first. I think that the Nuggets are going to be cutting some costs, regardless of the outcome of this season, which puts even more pressure on them to get it done this year. Makes it even more championship or bust, because I don't think that this team, as currently constructed, as much as you may like them and think they have what it takes to win a title, they're not going to be together next year. And you might say, well, I knew that. Peyton Watson, restricted free agent. Jonas Valanciunas is going to Greece, all that kind of stuff. I'm saying then add somebody. How many players you think that the Nuggets will not retain next year? Add one. That's the sense I'm getting. So you say no Peyton Watson and Jonas Valanciunas, pick somebody else too. I think that's what's going to happen. But you know what? That's down the road. That's a tomorrow problem. We just got the Nuggets back at full strength. So worry about what this team can do before we worry about how different the team's going to look next year. But it's what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling. On that happy note, I always end these shows on the highest of notes, just brimming with positivity. My apologies for that. It's one of the many things that I am working on to become a better human being. But I do very much appreciate you, your patronage, and you taking time to listen, watch, interact with the show. Kind of a quiet night on the sports front tonight, but tomorrow be really busy because we have both the Avs and the Nuggets playing. They will be back-to-back, no overlap, so long evening, but the best kind of long evening coming up tomorrow. Both of those games can be heard on Extra Sports 1300. In the meantime, enjoy your evening. If you want to go see a movie, pro tip, Project Hail Mary, saw it with the boys this weekend. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. It was amazing. So if you watch it and you don't like it, then you come back to me and you tell me why. I thought it was tremendous. Good job, Ryan Gosling. Talk to you tomorrow.